Welcome to Chapter 5, where we're talking about research and campaign planning. So for this, we're going to look at a couple of different things. We're going to give an overview of the 4 essential steps of effective public relations. Then we're going to look at the first 2 in detail, which is research and the research methods that go with it, and then planning, which is the second step. So let's start with the 4 essential steps of effective public relations. So there are, again, 4 steps, and we're only going to address the first 2 today. So you're going to follow this pattern in most PR positions. So let's start with that first step, and that first step is research. Now, if you have done an English class or any course in which you've had to complete research, a public speaking class, and so on, in order to write a paper or do a speech, then you've probably begun the process of research. What a PR practitioner does in terms of research is similar in the same way as what you might do for a class. Now, their end result, their desired outcome, is a little different than what you would look for in terms of writing, say, a literature review or some kind of research-based paper or speech. However, the process, you'll notice, has a lot of similarities. So the first thing you want to ask yourself is, what is research in general and how does it apply to my client or to this campaign? So research is a form of listening. It is essential. It is a process that is required in any public relations activity or campaign. Now, in some aspects, it's different, but you still have to perform research. Now, anytime you are deciding what am I going to do for this research and how am I going to conduct it, you want to ask yourself a series of questions. Now, this is applicable to any firsthand research that you're going to do, but it is certainly applicable to all PR practitioners when they are trying to determine how they're going to approach a research project for their client. So the list here that gives you a variety of different ways in which you can ask questions is a nice starting place. So for example, you might just begin with a very simple question like, what is the problem? If there is one. So let's say you are representing a brand new company that just started, maybe less than a year old. What is the problem? Well, think about it. The problem is they're less than a year old. So there's no image out there. There's no representation as of yet. It's so brand new that there needs to be some imagery introduced. The PR practitioner has a blank slate to start from, and that is a key question that you'll need to answer. Now, some of the rest of these could apply as well. Who is my audience? How will I use the research that I come up with? What kind of timetable am I on, and how much money do I have in order to complete this research? Because that's going to make a big difference in what type of research you choose. So let's look at some of the other ways in which research is used in order to make a difference for a client. So for example, if you are, say, trying to get a client, it's not a client that you have, but you're trying to get a client, or you're trying to show a management team, say you work for a PR facility that's all they do, and your goal is to attain credibility, to look good, to show that you have the skills needed. That might be a reason to do some real strong research and show that you're capable on a client. Another way would be to, hey, I don't really know exactly who's interested in my company yet, in this company that I'm representing, so I need to find a way to define or segment the group of people that I am going to submit advertising to, and so on. So for example, we looked at Yogurtini in the last week or so, and maybe we want to know exactly who are the key publics for Yogurtini. I mean, it's frozen yogurt, so it could be a lot of different people. So maybe the research's goal here is to define and segment who it is that frequents Yogurtini or someplace similar. And there's others here. See what your competition is like, generating publicity, preventing crises. Maybe you are just monitoring what is going on in order to make sure that you are capable of preventing any potential crises. Now, if you've ever done a Google alert or something similar to that, that is a good tool to attempt to prevent some crises. And what, if you've not used it before, what it is basically you put your client's name or the product or your own name into the Google alert, and anytime it is mentioned in a blog or it's mentioned on a news article or something along those lines, not always, but most of the times it gets sent to you so that you are aware of what is being said about your client. So again, that helps to prevent crises and also to sort of see what the situation is for your client. Now, when you decide what the question is that you want answered, when you have decided the basic general idea of research and why you want to do it, then you can determine what kind of research would be appropriate to answer these questions. Now, many of you have probably seen all of these before. You've seen these terms in many English classes or speech classes or what have you. In general, the goal of choosing how you're going to conduct research is to first determine what the purpose is of each type and how they are implemented or used. So you've probably heard the terms primary and secondary research before. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but basically it just means secondary research is stuff that you get from someone else. It's existing information, and primary research is raw data that you gathered yourself. And each of these can be pulled from both quantitative or qualitative bases. So a qualitative research the goal of that would be to find information that is theme-based, that is not necessarily something you could generalize to the public, but you can explore things and find out why things are occurring. So let's say your sales have dropped for your company, or people are not talking about you anymore. You may do a qualitative research project in order to find out why. So you're not trying to generalize information to a large group. You're trying to find out why it is that something is happening. You're exploring. You are trying to find rich data that helps you to make decisions. Now, in this case, you're going to do things like focus groups, which are really popular. And if you've not heard of a focus group before, in a simple sense, it is gathering of your public and a small sample size of your public and letting them speak amongst each other and yourself and giving just broad information. And then you gather themes from that. Whereas an in-depth interview is a little different in that it's usually one-on-one, and you ask specific questions and you get specific answers back. An observation is basically sitting in on a situation, whether that is live or watching it unfold on social media, for example, and then gathering data that way. So these are all exploratory. They're qualitative. They provide you quality information. Now, quantitative is generalizable. It is something that describes a behavior or a reason and explains why something is happening. And in this case, it's generalizable because it usually comes in a bulk. You're getting a lot of information from a lot of people. And in most situations, you're looking at a bunch of data, a lot of percentages, a lot of numbers. So you use surveys or anything else that generates a lot of data. And this is good if you kind of know the situation, but you want to know which direction to go with it, or you want to back up a theory or an idea. You could use quantitative research, and it can come in a lot of different manners. So let's look at some of the techniques that you can use. Now, we mentioned before that you can use a focus group. And focus groups and interviews being those sort of qualitative type research methods, they are very, very rich. They're very interesting. They're very easy to find themes with. Well, I don't know if I'd call it easy, but they are useful to find themes. In addition to that, you have some other things that you could do. For example, content analysis. This is a popular one with public relations. What this means is you take some language, it might be a brochure, maybe more appropriately, maybe it's a list of reviews on Amazon for your product, or for your company. So you take that list of reviews and say you have 50 reviews. You read through those and you search for themes among those reviews. Maybe over and over and over again you have this theme of, well, this product is nice looking, but it breaks really fast. And so you find that through content analysis. And there are others. Obviously, you can do a traditional research through databases online, or you can actually do an experiment with scientific sampling and so on. And there's many other ways to research. The key is, what do you want to know, and what's the best way to go about finding that information? That's the key. And once you've decided that you want to go a specific direction, you have to choose who your sample is. Now, random sampling is basically pulling from your target audience and doing it in a way that leads to the best possible results. Now, everyone in your target audience, if it's random, has an equal opportunity to be selected. So you're not specifically choosing only people that have access to the internet at that moment, or only people that are in this geographical area, or only people of a particular income level. Unless they're your target audience, then it's okay to choose those people. But within that target audience, let's say we're going to refer to Yogurtini, who we know wants women ages 18 to 25, or at least those are the sample, the population that frequent Yogurtini. So if we know that within that group of women ages 18 to 25, we are going to pull randomly those folks that would most represent that group. So only women ages 18 to 25, but we don't want to stick to a specific income level, or maybe we don't want to stick to a specific geographical area, or what have you. It just depends on our needs. Now, some of the other things to consider is the size of that sample. Now, we mentioned before that sample size is a portion of the population, but what portion is appropriate? Now, it does depend on how big your population is, but there is a pretty good rule of thumb to follow for the size of a group of people that you're going to pull from. So, for example, if you choose to do quantitative data selection, if you choose to do the research methodology that asks for things to be generalizable, that you can say, hey, this can be generalized to everyone in my public, in my group of people. Well, then you need numbers, because you can't just pull 20 people out, survey them, and say, well, that applies to all of my public. That only applies to those 20 people. And those 20 people maybe weren't randomly sampled and don't fit the profile. You need big enough numbers to avoid error in that situation. And the bigger the number, the less opportunity for error. Now, this says usually a sample of 250 to 500 people will provide a pretty good margin of error. It's not huge. And that's pretty standard. I see often people doing surveys with about 300 people, 3 to 350, and they're happy about that. So that's a good tool to use. But the grand perception to have is that the smaller the number, the greater margin of error. And this illustrates it really nicely. You can see that the bigger the number, the smaller the sliver is of the option for error, or the opportunity for error. So basically what that says is, if you were to say generalize that women ages 18 to 25 will not spend more than $4 on frozen yogurt with toppings, you need to have surveyed enough people to make that generalizable. Because if you only surveyed 100 people and that is the determination you came from, you're going to be on a 10% error. That means 10% is going to be incorrect. So it'd be worthwhile to get as many as possible to avoid that. Now, when you are reaching for these respondents, you have a lot of different ways in which you can do it. Real popular right now are web-based surveys. Also, surveys that are in-house. So, for example, if you are doing Yogurtini, there might be surveys on the checkout counter that you are asking your employees to quickly have to have people survey and then answer those questions. Now, there are others. You can literally do a one-on-one interview if you're looking for something a little more qualitative, or you could do phone surveys, although those are not as successful anymore. If you work for a PR company and you have multiple clients, you could do what's called a piggyback survey. And a piggyback survey basically just pulls from a lot of different topics and puts it all into one survey. And what that does is that allows those that are participating in the survey to pool their resources and fund the research project in a more realistic manner. So you usually have one survey, but it's got 5 different topics because each of your clients have 5 different needs. But there are a variety of ways ways of doing this. Once you have gotten to the point in which you are comfortable with your research and you've conducted it and you've gathered that data and you're good to go, then you can move to the next step, and that is the planning step. And the planning step allows you to set a plan of action that allows you to see the big picture and make adjustments as needed. It has to be very strategic, and you have to have a system, a plan. You have certain elements to put into place. And usually there are a variety of methods to choose from. Now, right here, there's a couple that have been listed through your textbook and through other resources like Management by Objective and the Ketchum Strategic Planning Model. There are a lot of models, but in any model, you're going to have 8 simple elements that exist. Now, these elements are in some way, shape, or form in existence in a program plan. Now, a public relations program plan identifies what is to be done, why, and how to accomplish it. That's the goal. So in order to do that, you need these 8 things. First, starting with the situation. You just got to figure out what's going on. What is the answer to those questions? Or what is the question in itself? What's the situation? What's the problem? What do I need to address? Then you can move to the objectives, where you decide what is my goal? What do I want to achieve? Now that I know the situation, I know the problem, what is the goal here for this client? And you want those objectives to be specific. You don't want to say, I want to increase my clientele, because I don't know how to measure that. You want to say, I want a 10% increase in the clientele for this particular group or this product. That's key. Make sure it's measurable. Make sure it's very specific. Then you got to define who your audience is. You need to know who your public is. Yogurtini would say women ages 18 to 25. That would be key. Then you can go to the strategy. Now, a strategy statement describes, in general, more of in a concept or a theory-based way, how the campaign will proceed. So it doesn't necessarily give all the details, but it gives you an overview of what you want to do. How do you want this PR campaign to look and feel? But then when you get to the tactics, those are the nuts and bolts. Those are the specifics. Finally, once you've got the nuts and bolts, how are we going to do this? We're going to use social media. Are we going to create ad campaigns? Are we going to send out press releases, and so on? Then you can set up the logistics of it, and that is the calendar and timetable and the budget. So the calendar and timetable says, hey, how long is this going to last? And at what intervals are we going to present the information? And then the budget says, how much money do I have to achieve my end results? And that budget is going to manipulate strategy and tactics as well, because without the right budget, you can't necessarily do big, huge ad campaigns. With a big budget, maybe you could. With a small budget, maybe you need to focus more on social media. So it depends on what that budget is to determine some of these other things. And then finally, how is it going to be measured? So again, I said that the objectives need to be very clear, very specific, so that when you get to this point, you can measure what happened after the program plan and the campaign was put into practice and determine whether it worked or not. That's the key. So hopefully this gives you a good overview of both how to research and create a program plan that has these major 8 objectives, or major 8 elements, so that all the pieces are there. If you have questions, let me know, and have a good rest of your week.